Thank you for coming, everybody, to our gallery talks. We're really delighted to be part of the opening night of the Gallery Weekend by AGAC, and we're particularly excited to have an exhibition with Peter Campbell from Montreal. For tonight, we'd like to lead the talk with Peter. Will be a gallery colleague of mine, Alicia Bozhkov, and together we'll have a conversation with Peter about his work and the production over the last 2 years. So first I want to say thank you for an exquisite show, Peter. It's really beyond our expectations.
So I think we can jump right in and kind of talk about Dithering Rover, the piece right behind me here. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about your growing interest in perspective.
Yeah, this actually was the first painting I was taking ornamentation, pattern, design, history and interest in textiles and mosaics, tile work, and applying it to like a real space that can be inhabited and walk through, perspective in terms of using colors in a way which, dance and they move. But perspective for me was creating these pathways, creating tunnels as like avenues for movement, and that can be activated. I wanted some more engagement with the viewer in that sense.
Could you speak more about your interest in the pathways?
I'm really interested in like pathways in terms of someone who's at a crossroads, like someone who has this opportunity for multiple venues of movement.
When you look deeper into the paintings, you see the surface of the painting. As you look more deeply, you can see the layers, and you can see both the application of paint and the removal of paint.
I think I'm moving closer to a point where my experience is becoming more clear. I'm more comfortable with mistakes, with having rougher strokes, leaving just the entire experience, not just trying to cover up things, but just, being okay with what happens.
Letting the painting reveal itself as you paint it. Your paintings take a long time to make. Can you give us some idea of the layering and how long they take? And, because I know you're using oil, so they have to dry in between.
What I got really interested in doing was experimenting a bit with gesso and ground and making my own. So I like the surface to be built up to a point where it's incredibly thick, it's textured, and I want paint not to look like paint. I want paint to look like other things that I'm referencing. In the show, you could see times where I'm referencing or there's fabric or basketry tiles, ceramics that are insinuated, but they're not entirely present. They're not at the forefront of the work. And for this piece, I had a piece of lace which was found. Essentially, I just loved the simplicity of the floral pattern. I managed to kind of spread it out and layer it as the painting was done. It wasn't up on an easel, it was on the floor, and use it essentially as a stencil. And so by using really thick paint with a big brush, I was working in between it. So what's left, the remnants of the stencil, is the black. It's kind of placed in the middle. And then it was about going back in and kind of that dialogue between the man-made, the commercial, and my own hand. And this painting really came from actually another painting. One night I had a monograph of Canaletto's work, and Canaletto, for those who don't know, I think he was an 18th century Venetian cityscape painter. I started making these drawings based off the original painting. It got really interesting. The drawings changed, so it ended up being quite different than the, obviously the original painting, and it It was about putting myself in that history and trying to have that conversation at that point of ornamentation and pattern. And it was really interesting to kind of play with each component of the painting and work at having its own character, its own flow, its own feel. I wanted to represent maybe being in the forest at the peak time of fruition, of lusciousness, and being enveloped in this experience, in this environment, and having no borders between yourself, the experience, and the atmosphere, or wherever you are. And it's, about being in nature, essentially. This painting, it's not necessarily about the marks that are left, it's also equally about the spaces between the marks and how that breathes. And I was interested in having color be liquid, color that moves and breathes and just flows. I like to think of the sculpture as being, they work in parallel to the painting, but yet it's a completely opposite process, because with sculpture you're working, it's all reductive. You're working with the maximum amount of material, and it's about ending with the least. So with the sculpture, it was really about getting down to the elementary forms, kind of feeling like bones or cartilage, without the embellishment, and they're not ornamental, they're just simply structural. Kind of felt like the way wind will wear down rock in the desert, or water by the ocean, it'll end up creating these really irregular shapes, This painting was made around the same time as those other two sculptures, and I was working through similar ideas where I really wanted things to breathe more. It's quite simple. There's, it was 3 layers of membranous, porous layers of mesh netting superimposed upon each other, and the furthest layer is the darkest layer. It's the most dense. And the middle layer, it kind of gets a little lighter in tone, and then the final layer that we are closest to is the layer that's brightest. It's the one that breathes the most. So this was, kind of closer to playing with abstraction and perspective, where, light and tone and volume are all at play, but in a way where it's quite flat, but I wanted it to be like a cocoon that envelops you. With these panel paintings, I would layer them up until the surface is quite rough and abrasive, and then I would go in with a really matte, thick slab of paint that might have some chalk, might have some pigment in it, beeswax. I would lay a generous slab down, and then by using, a lot of makeshift crude implements, such as nails to pens or X-Acto knives, or just tools that I had created, you can remove paint and create really thin, precise, line drawings. This painting probably relates more to the body than others, because it was really about this dance where I didn't bring my hand off the surface of the paint, and this repetition, and through this sheer accumulation of gestures and sweeping movements, it's this web is created that's everything is kind of inextricably linked.